Welcome back to the OSM channel. In today's video, I'd like to teach you how to replace the canister vent valve as well as the canister purge valve on a GMC Terrain with 2.4 liter Ecotech motor. Now, before we get into this repair and I teach you how to replace these valves, I want to talk about the evap system and the code that this car currently has. Now, this GMC Terrain has an engine code that comes and goes. It's a P-0442 indicating we have a small evap leak somewhere within the system and we have to try and figure out where it is or give it our best shot. It's a non-critical code. However, we're going to have a major issue when it comes time to get this car re-inspected. In my state, in order to get a car re-inspected, you have to go to a state-authorized inspection facility. They plug in a code reader, and they will fail your car if they find certain codes present, especially codes pertaining to the emission system. Now, the evap system is an emission system, and because we have an evap leak, this car will absolutely fail its next inspection if we don't address this issue. Well, the good news is I spent the morning drawing this crude schematic to give you a good visual understanding as to how the evap system basically works. Now, the first thing I want to note is that the evap system must be airtight. Now, the basic idea behind the evap system is it captures the vapors from the fuel in the fuel tank, stores them in the charcoal canister, and then as the car senses or calls for, it will allow those vapors to be injected or drawn into the intake of the car to which they are burned, and it's just better for the environment because these vapors are not escaping into the atmosphere. So system components, we have our gas cap. Any really important area that sees a lot of friction or movement, mechanical movement, I have highlighted in red. So first we have our gas cap. Now, if you get this code, the first thing you want to do is check your gas cap. Make sure the gas cap is on there nice and tight. If it feels like it's on there tight, unscrew it, inspect the seal. And the first thing I'd recommend doing would be replacing the gas cap with an OEM gas cap, clearing the code, and give the car a few days, maybe a week or two, and see if that code comes back, because that is your most likely culprit. From there, there is a fuel line that allows that gasoline to flow down into the fuel tank. Now, the fuel tank has a pressure sensor, that's really important, and there's also a vapor line that goes between the fuel tank to the charcoal canister. Now, the charcoal canister basically captures those vapors and stores them. From there, I believe in the charcoal canister we have a valve. It's called the charcoal canister vent valve, and I have written on here N.O, which indicates this valve is normally open. From there, that vent line flows to a purge valve, which I believe is on the engine. Now, that purge valve is normally closed. So I think what happens when the car senses that there's an excessive amount of pressure in the system, it tells the car, hey, open up the purge valve and allow those vapors to go into the intake, something along those lines. The areas of this system that see the most mechanical wear are obviously these valves. You know, the car has close to 200,000 miles on, so it's pretty likely that these valves are starting to fail, and also the seal on that gas cap from being tightened and loosened for so many years, that is a likely area of failure. Now, how does the car sense that we have an evap system leak? Well, what happens from time to time, the car will say, all right, we got to test the evap system. So what it'll do, it'll monitor the pressure sensor, it will close the vent valve and the purge valve, and then it's just going to monitor that pressure. Now, if it finds that the pressure decreases or fluctuates, it will throw some type of code. And depending on the amount of pressure lost over a period of time, you may get a small evap leak, a medium evap leak, or a large evap leak. Now, really, the best way to determine where your evap leak is would be by way of a smoke machine and a very expensive scan tool that would allow you to monitor the pressure sensor, but also manually open both of these valves. Manually open and close these valves, you know, as you see fit. Which the average Joe, like myself and probably you watching this video, is not about to spend $2,000 on a smoke machine and a proper scan tool. So we're just going to have to give this our best guess. And again, the most likely areas of failure would be the gas cap, number one, and two, these two valves. So in today's video, I'm going to show you how to replace these valves, starting with the purge valve in the engine compartment. And thankfully, these valves aren't expensive. You know, they're about $35 a piece. Recommend going with OEM valves. I'll leave links for these valves in the description down below. Now, the first valve we're going to be replacing, which is the purge valve, is going to be located to the right of the oil fill cap underneath this shroud. So in order to access this, we first need to remove the air box, then the shroud. In front of the mass airflow sensor, you will find a hose clamp, 8mm. Loosen up this clamp. Pop it off. Left side of the air box, you'll find what I believe is a crankcase vent line. You want to very carefully wiggle this and pull this straight out. This is a fragile line and you don't want to break it. There's an O-ring on there. You can inspect that as well while you're here. Now if you look at the front of the air box, look down, makes a connection to the throttle body. Now right above the throttle body, you'll find another hose clamp, 8mm fastener, so just loosen up that hose clamp. And starting at the front, we'll lift this air box up and work the back, side to side. Very carefully pull this air box up and out of here. Next thing we need to do is to protect the throttle body. Now you don't want any debris getting down into the throttle body, so what I'm going to do to protect it is just slip a nitrile glove over the throttle body. Next we need to remove this engine shroud. In order to remove the engine shroud, first thing we're going to have to do is temporarily remove our oil fill cap. And then you want to grab a corner, carefully lift up. There's like rubber ball and socket joints underneath here. Sometimes the rubber stays stuck on the panel or the connector. We'll just kind of shimmy this off to the right. Very careful with that vent line there. Reinstall the oil fill cap so no debris gets down in the engine. And we have access to the purge valve, which is to the right and slightly back from the oil fill cap. So the first thing we need to do is remove the electrical connection. So we're going to lift up on this red tab, pop the electrical connection off. Now as for the upper connection, which I believe ties back to the canister vent valve, there is a white kind of spring-loaded connector. So you're going to push this in, carefully twist and lift up. Gentle pressure here. This should kind of come up with some ease. You don't want to force this line because you definitely don't want to break it. And that is how you remove the upper line. And I'm just going to carefully shift this out of the way. So now we need to remove this canister off of the holding clip. So let me refocus the camera and show you what to do next. All right, so to get this purge valve out of here, here's what I recommend. Right-handed hose pick. So there's a metal bracket that this slides into. And if you look at the tip of that hose hook, you'll see that there's a tab, kind of like a springy tab, and it locks into the plastic on the valve. So my recommendation, get your hose pick, come from the right side, insert the pick end to the left. You see how that's kind of poking out? Well, what you're going to do is get that against that tab that kind of locks it in there. We're going to try and bend that tab outward a little bit. See how that's bending out? We're probably going to have to re-bend that back in before we reinstall the new valve. But then take your pick again, come in here from the side or something. Well, you got a little bit of leverage, and you see how that kind of works itself out. Now you may find that it's a little bit difficult to slide this out of here, and that's due to rust and corrosion. But there's also a wire harness here, a main wire harness, but you should have enough clearance to slide this out. If you need to, you could bend this tab right here out of the way or do what you got to do. Try and make enough clearance. There we go. Gently take it off. So here's our purge valve. Now the hose connected to the underside of the purge valve is this hose right here, and of course it goes right into the intake. So you could try and pop that valve off that hose. However, I was having a little bit of trouble doing it, so I've elected to remove the connection where this lower hose connects directly to the intake. And it's the same clip as the one that was on the top of the valve. You know, it's this white spring-loaded clip. So I have that clip pushed up, gently gonna pull and twist. It should come off with relative ease. There we go. Now we should be able to carefully get this whole assembly up and out of here. I think it was definitely the right decision removing this up out of the engine bay. It's much easier to access this connector now and less likely that we break anything. So again, we have this white spring-loaded connector. So you're just going to want to push on that connector and a little bit of twisting motion and pull that valve right out of there. Now we can reinstall the new valve. Connector popped on, give it a pull test, and this is ready to be reinstalled. While we're here, we're actually going to quickly test this old valve. Now, if you remember from that diagram, this purge valve is NC, normally closed, and the pressure feeds into this valve from the black port. The outlet is, of course, the gray port. So I have an air wand. I'm going to put a little bit of pressure to the black port, and we'll see if anything gets through on the gray side. And there's actually nothing coming through the gray side. So that tells me this is actually likely still a good valve, but mechanically speaking, after 200,000 miles, there's a good chance the internals are definitely worn down, but this one is not leaking. Now with the new valve installed, we can carefully snake this assembly back in its original position. And of course, we have to reconnect this line to the intake manifold. Give it a tug test. That is reconnected. So before we reinstall the valve back on the bracket, you remember we kind of bent this locking piece of steel outward in order to slide it out. Well, we're going to have to bend that finger back in. So with my right-handed hose pick, I'm just going to carefully push it back in a little bit. And it should not be in line here. It should be pushed in towards the windshield slightly, maybe an 1/8 inch. That is good there. Just going to push the harness out of the way slightly. Line the valve back up on that bracket. And push the valve in, and then we should hear a little click when that finger kind of locks into the valve. So I will say there was no click. However, I did get that finger engaged with the plastic casting. You are going to have to take your right-handed pick and just get in there and bend that bracket a little bit, because with the amount of corrosion and rust buildup on that bracket, it's likely not going to want to go on its own. But you'll get it. So now we can reinstall the connection on the top of the valve. And again, you have to push this connector in. A little bit of downward pressure. It should go on. Re-engage the clip. Give it a tug test. That upper connection is good. And finally, just got to plug back in the electrical connector. Beauty. Also inspect your electrical lines while you're here, but everything looks good. Time to reinstall the shroud back onto the top of the engine. And the first thing you're going to want to do is remove the oil fill cap. Now, mounting location. You'll notice there are 3 steel ball mounts, one here, and one here. And again, sometimes the rubbers on the shroud stay stuck on those balls, so that's just something to watch for. Then we'll reinstall this shroud from right to left. Very careful with that vent line. I like to take a hand and just feel underneath the shroud. Line up the rubbers with the balls. One more in the back. Then firm pressure on top of each ball. 1, 2, 3. Oil cap. All right, time to reinstall the airbox. So first thing we're going to do is remove our nitrile glove off of the throttle body. Now in terms of mounting, what I like to do is start by installing the airbox back onto the throttle body. Remember, there's that hose and hose clamp down there. From there, then we can work on the rear mounts. Again, we have 2 more of these steel balls, and the rubbers are on the airbox, and then we'll worry about everything on the left. But again, just be careful of that vent line. See, there's our hose clamp. So I'm just going to line this up on the throttle body. Sometimes you may need to loosen up that hose clamp a little bit more. But you want to ensure that that is properly seated and that the throttle body hose clamp is on there good and tight. Really important. I actually got to loosen up that clamp a little bit. That is fully seated. Next, I'm going to get the mounts on the back of this. That is properly seated. Of course, we got to reattach our accordion hose that connects to our air filter box. And there is our vent line. Again, inspect that O-ring, but just push that back in. Beauty. Finally, we need to tighten up the hose clamps. Again, one here and one connected to the throttle body. So we are all finished in the engine bay with the purge valve. Now we need to get to the vent valve, which is going to be on the left side of the car, the driver's side of the car, I believe in between the driver's seat and rear passenger seat on the underside. So my plan is I'm going to spin the car around, we'll back it in the garage, and I'm going to position ramps, both of my drive up ramps on the left side of the car to lift up the left side of the car to give us better access to that charcoal canister and valve. With the driver's side of the car now up on these ramps, before we go underneath the car and start working, let's install jack stands, again on the driver's side of the car, by the rear tire as well as the front tire. Also, before you head onto there, get your penetrating oil, 10mm fastener, and some safety gear. You're going to need it. So you're currently looking towards the front of the car. As we draw our attention back to the left of the muffler, you will find the charcoal canister. Now it's held on here with 3 rusty fasteners. One in the front, one towards the rear left, and one towards the rear right. Let's hope we can get these nuts off of here. So I'm going to spray some penetrating oil and try and remove the nuts with my little impact. Alright, so I successfully got this charcoal canister down here. Now the key to removing these nuts, especially if you have rusty studs, penetrating oil, and then with your small impact, back them off, you know, maybe a turn, and then tighten them up, and then back them off a turn and a half and tighten them up. You just want to work these slowly back and forth. That way you don't mar or damage any of the threads, or even worse, snap a stud. So you can do it, just take your time, a lot of back and forth, a lot of lubricant. Now on this canister, this charcoal canister, I'm noticing that there are 2 electronic devices. Towards to the front, I believe this is actually the pressure sensor, which in my crude diagram, my schematic, I show that pressure sensor on the fuel tank. This may in fact be the pressure sensor. Not 100% sure, but I think it is. Now towards the back, this is our valve that we are replacing. Figure we'll try and get this electrical connector off first. So I think this is a 2-stage connector. I'm going to start by getting underneath this red tab, trying to get this retracted back like that. See how we have that retracted back? Now we should be able to pinch right here, slide that connector off. So that's one problem out of the way. Try and twisting it to the right. I think I'm going to get a little bit more aggressive now. There we go. Okay. Yeah, so in my case, it definitely did need to be twisted to the right, clockwise. And now I'm expecting a big ball of dust to kind of pop out of here, so I'm going to rotate the canister on its side. Make sure you're in focus. We'll see how much debris comes out of here. Yeah, that's kind of what I was expecting. So I do have a clean paper towel. Right or wrong, I'm going to try and get in that hole a little bit and clean out what I can. I will say, channel locks, that was definitely the right tool for the job. Alright, I just put a little bit of lubricant on those O-rings because I cannot get this valve in there. See, it's starting to go down there. Just keep working it, downward pressure. Try and rotate it to the left now. Boom, right in. Yeah, it definitely helps to have those O-rings lubricated. So let's just reinstall that electrical connector. Pop it in. Again, this is the 2-stage. I guess you got to push on this tab slider on. Push the red connector in. That is in place. All we have to do now is reinstall this up onto the studs. Tell you, it's not a fun job, but it's doable. Definitely channel locks and lubricate the O-rings. That's my tip for you. So whenever you're doing a job like this, you always want to inspect your line. Sorry about the shaky video, but this is really important. So if we follow this line that comes out of the charcoal canister, notice how it goes in the frame rail? It's the second one down from the top. Now, that connection point right there to the plastic mount is rusty. It's not terrible, but let's keep following that line down along the chassis, right? So it's the second line here. All right, we're starting to get some pretty good rust build up there. But it gets a little bit worse. This connection right here on the mount, see that really rusty line? That is the vapor line in between the charcoal canister to that valve in the engine. What is that, the purge valve in there? So if this does not correct our issue, I'd say there's a very strong possibility that in fact is our issue right there. And it looks like to replace that line probably be a pain in the butt, but it looks like that's probably something that would have to be done next. So now that we have these two valves replaced, and hopefully you replace your fuel cap as well, $100 later, what do you do now? Well, my recommendation would be to clear your engine codes and drive the car normally for a week or two and see if that P-0442, that small evap leak code, comes back. If it comes back, then, well, what are we at, $100 here? And also, while we were doing this job, again, we noticed that, especially that vapor line in between the purge and the vent valve along the frame rail there, that is looking really crusty, and I would say there's a good chance that would be the next, or well, probably one of the most likely culprits of this small evap leak, but we'll just give it some time. We'll see what it does. I figure we'll play around with this canister valve, see if we can get it to actuate with the power probe here. And it's still actuating just fine. I don't know if you can see it on camera. You see that there's what appears to be a blue seal on this valve. And what do you think? I mean, after tens of thousands of cycles, there's a good chance that that seal is starting to leak a little bit. But also, again, you know, that vapor line on the frame rail looks pretty crusty as well. So, well, that's about all I can do for you folks today. I'd like to thank you for watching. I will leave links for these OEM valves in the description down below, as well as the fuel cap. And, you know, it's just one of those things. We'll have to play it by ear and just keep chipping away at it if that code comes back. You know, go to a professional mechanic with proper equipment. I mean, what do they charge now? $150, $200 an hour, so only at $100 here. We have some new nice components on the car. Got to do what you got to do. Anyway, I'd like to thank you for watching as always. I will catch you on the next one.